Welcome back to another edition of the Edge podcast. Publisher Brenden Slaughter here for BeaversEdge.com, joined by Beavers Edge senior writer Ryan Harlan. We're coming to you guys midweek ahead of Oregon State's matchup with FCS Lafayette on Saturday. Beavers looking to get in the win column for the first time this season, standing at 0-7. And man, we obviously have talked to you guys midweek as we podcasted on Sunday with Dylan talking about the reaction of the Trent Bray dismissal and all the fallout that's come with it. Everything's going to be a lot different on Saturday. We're gonna dive into all the nitty gritty of the details of what's changed, new rules, new responsibilities for certain coaches, what have you. But overall, again, just kind of setting the stage. This will be Oregon State's first game without former head coach Trent Bray. Again, he was dismissed on Sunday. The Beavers have named Robb Akey the interim head coach. They have now, quote, begun their national search. We'll be hiring a search firm to come. We'll be having a committee of internal, external figures around the university. It seems to be that there may even be some former players involved in that process too. So it's going to be a collaborative process in addition to the athletic department leading the way on that. Again, thanks for tuning into this edition of the Edge podcast. Lots to get into today. Ryan, obviously we just wrapped up defense interviews today on Wednesday. You talked to Danny Langsdorf, Trent Walker, Anthony Hankerson on Tuesday, and then Robb Akey and Scott Barnes on Monday. Just before I get your big thoughts on everything that happened, just to set the stage for everybody. So the big changes beyond Robb Akey this week. Danny Langsdorf, former Oregon State OC, will be taking over play calling duties, quote-unquote offensive coordinator for this week against Lafayette. Unclear if it'll be permanent moving forward. Ryan Gunderson shifts back to quarterbacks. Mark Kreiner is going to be coaching linebackers, as Trent Bray also coached linebackers. Co-defensive coordinators in Rod Chance and Eliza Tuiaki, and I believe that's it. Ryan, am I missing on anything else as far as the immediate staff changes go?
Well, special teams, Robb Akey was saying that it's a collective effort. He's still going to oversee it, but his son, Daniel Akey, will have more of a kind of expanded role, kind of helping out, with the coaches that are prepping for special teams week in and week out. So it's really a big theme of like guys stepping up to, adding more responsibility onto their plate. The big thing, is kind of what we've talked with Tuiaki about and Langsdorf is just like, hey, this is resume building season. We're trying to do our best here to not reinvent the wheel, just to fill in the gaps and try to make something work out of what's here for us in these 5 games is basically what their goal is. It's not that, you're going to expect anything like drastically different. They want to try and clean up what they've done and what they're good at doing. Kind of going into Saturday, like even Langs was like, yeah, it's really communication. That's the biggest thing that needs to be fixed there. And hopefully, having kind of harping in on those details helps things out a little bit and kind of being able to, kind of self-assess, right? A little bit where you're at now at 0-7. Even Tuiaki was saying the same thing too. It's putting guys in the best positions possible to make those plays and maybe simplifying some things down, taking some things out, just because of availability of guys. And now when I say availability, that doesn't necessarily mean just injury. It could mean, guys that are kind of borderline, that are, somewhat contributors, that are not really contributors. They're kind of buried on the depth chart. It's like, hey, do you really want to burn another year of eligibility? Guys that, maybe are further down the line. It's like, you're kind of putting out tape there and maybe you don't stay another year, right? Like, do you really want to waste that opportunity if you go somewhere else? Or guys are just flat out injured in some cases too. So, right. It's very much, really for what those guys are doing. It's just kind of, filling in the gaps where they can, taking on more responsibility and just trying to make things work in these, 5 games. And that's what Akey basically said too in his press conference on Monday. It's like, things haven't worked and we're going to make some changes because things have to change if we're going to try to win games, right? So that's something there where I just kind of got the sense that was kind of the message this week from not only Akey, Langs, and Tuiaki, but just kind of even talking to the players as well. It's like moving on to the next thing and kind of going from there.
Right, and obviously, it was kind of odd because we talked about it on Sunday, but now that we've had some more time to reflect, I think it caught a lot of Oregon State fans by surprise, the move with Trent Bray on Sunday, and I think we've
It
seen
caught
now.
us off guard a little bit
Oh,
too, as
totally.
well. Yeah.
Totally. I mean, Ryan and I and Brogan, we all walked out of Reeser on Saturday thinking maybe, an unnamed coordinator would be would be let go at worst kind of a situation, but at the same token, we've now seen an outpouring, and we got a thread going at BeaversEdge.com on the damn board right now. Check it out, where current former players' reaction to the news, Ryan, and it's kind of been interesting, and I kind of want to get your take on this too, because it really does seem like to me recently there's been a lot of kind of playing both sides of the fence by Oregon State fans, in the sense of like there was a lot of loud volume that changes needed to be made, especially after that Wake Forest game, and then now you're kind of seeing outpouring of support, and I want to highlight Jaden Grant, who had one of the more outpouring tweets in support of Trent Bray. And I think both things can be true, Ryan. Trent Bray can be a fantastic leader of men and a great confidant and a great defensive coach, but to quote Scott Barnes, if you can't command the enterprise, which we've talked about it at length. We don't know how much Trent Bray wanted to be a head coach. We don't know how much he enjoyed the booster schmoozing behind the scenes, all the things that go into being a head coach beyond just being a player development person. So I just kind of wanted to make note and say, obviously it didn't work as head coach, but that doesn't mean that like Trent Bray's not those things that all these players are saying. I believe both can be true, Ryan. What are kind of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts as well too, and the sense that you also got from talking to players today as well. It's like they feel like, I'm not going to speak for all of them, but the sense I kind of get, and at least from how things felt for Trent when we talked to him
Right.
on Tuesday, was guys are hurt. Like, it's like Bray had a lasting impact on him as, not only a coach and also a person too. And
Right.
that's even the sense I got, from
We all
talking to
did.
him.
We
Yeah,
all
talking
did.
to
Yeah.
him one-on-one in the conversations I've had with him, and then also to talking to former players as well, like, and players currently on the roster. Like, so yeah, both can be true at times, and like, I get it, you know what I mean? But also too, it's just kind of, I'm not gonna like say like it's not the wrong thing to say. I think it's also just one of those where like what Akey said. It's like, is Bray a head coach at some point in his coaching career? Yeah, but maybe the situation here wasn't the one for him where it worked out in that
Right.
manner. Right? Like, that's what I think it is. And he kind of compared it to, Pete Carroll at New England before, going back into the college ranks and then coming back out to coach the Seattle Seahawks, like, and how that changed for him his second time
Right.
around being a head coach. So it might be one of those kind of situations, but really time will tell,
Right.
kind of deal. And then, yeah, kind of the last thing I wanted to touch on was, the staffing changes wise, like, with Ryan Gunderson. Yeah, we don't know if that's going to be permanent. I would have to assume it is, but basically it seems to be more of a, pretty telling move from Akey in kind of
Right.
all this. And so maybe, that was kind of what Barnes was maybe looking for at all. This was to make those calls and be like, hey, look, clearly something's not working. We're going to, go to a different guy for this, and hopefully to see if that works itself out. And now,
Right.
like, that's, loyalty to a fault. Other coaches have had that before. Jonathan Smith had that for years on end with Tim Tebessar. Like, that
Mike Riley had it at times
Yep.
too. Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
it comes with the job. Coaches, learn through those kind of things. So I think for Bray going forward, this is a learning experience.
Right.
And, he'll land on his feet somewhere else. But that's something to me where I think, yeah, I agree with you. Both can be true in that manner. And like, and guys have said too, on the effort side of things, it's like, we haven't finished out games, but we're not going to say that guys have, quit on that, kind of the not bringing that into the
Sure.
into the forefront and giving that too much air in the way that, that kind of is. But it's like, it's also, something that was also legitimate to
Right.
mention afterwards, where things didn't look great at the end there of the Wake Forest game. So do you understand the
No, I
move
mean,
and kind of like the big grand scheme of things from not only the human component of it with a guy losing his job versus, the product that you saw on the field. And it's like you don't really envy anybody in that
no.
decision to make that call.
No, it's a tough spot. And, I empathize with Trent Walker because, obviously check that video out at BeaversEdge.com. He talked about how, quote, pissed he was. And, for someone like that, Ryan, and I'm not going to specifically name names, but nobody in the United States of America could question Trent Walker's effort and dedication to this football team this season. Period. He has
No.
maybe been, like I said a couple weeks ago in my takeaways, he was Superman and it still didn't matter, right? Kind of a situation.
Yeah.
So taking him kind of aside, Ryan, the question was asked by 3 or 4 different media on Saturday. I thought it was at minimum Oregon State's most lifeless performance at home since 2019 Utah, which I believe was 52-7, 45-7, something like that. Or
It was more in the 50s
yeah,
range.
yeah. Or even going
Yeah.
further back, I was sitting there talking with you guys, being like, "Is this going to be Oregon State's first home shutout since 2015?" So you talk about that. You talk about how the fans, Ryan, have really made a statement with their butts in seats, for lack of better terms, since the Fresno State game, right? You talk about Houston, despite being a great student crowd, not a great, wasn't full by any means. And then,
No.
you
Yeah,
get into
definitely
Wake
not.
Forest, and that was, Ryan, I saw something out there that said the Beavers had like 25, almost 30,000. I'm like, what are you looking at? Maybe in tickets sold, but not butts in seats. And,
No,
and at the
no.
end of the day, that goes back to the enterprise factor where it's like, the Beavers were just not trending in the right direction. And I don't know, I think regardless of whether they made the move with Bray or I think if they had Bray, they'd still find a way to beat Lafayette this week. I firmly believe that. But Ryan, sometimes you benefit from new eyes and new perspectives on a situation, and Danny Langsdorf's going to bring in a new perspective on offense. And then obviously, I would assume Tuyaki, who was, a good defensive coordinator at BYU for many years, and Rod Chance will do some different things too. So when when everything hasn't worked, and we kind of saw the culmination on Saturday, Ryan, of like everything really not working, I feel like you kind of need to shake things up. I'm not saying I advocated for the move, but I think you'll see a Beaver team that, you know, like Ryan was saying, we don't really know what to expect because now the question begs itself, Ryan, even more. Who is still going to be as dedicated as they were? Will we have more players who are just going through the motions down the last 5 weeks of the season? What did kind of Robb Akey say about that when you kind of talked about, the motivation for the guys down the stretch of the season?
I mean, really, the biggest thing that Akey wants to do is just try and make football fun again, right?
Yeah,
Losing sucks.
it does.
It's plain and simple.
It
Like, if you're a
does.
competitor, like it sucks, but each week is a new week to go 1-0, right? I mean, that was literally, literally what Akey was talking about. Like, that's basically what it is. And like, that's kind of been the energy at practice, trying to get guys to, be, focused in on Lafayette. Like, that's exactly what it is. It's like, yeah, the mood was somber. It's down. It's like, now we got to go turn the page and go out there and play a football game on Saturday. Like, that's really what Akey's been doing. And talking with Nico Taylor earlier, like that was something that Akey's been trying to do. Just get that infectious energy back into this team after
Right.
an
They're missing
0-7
it.
start, and having Bray be fired. Like, having a head coach get fired sucks for the guys. Like it does. So that's kind of what's the message going forward. And yeah, we don't know what these changes are going to look like. And like, even from what Langs and Tuyaki were saying, like, it's not going to be a big reinventing of the wheel. There might be some
Sure.
slight tweaks and some slight things that they do that are a little bit different, but like, sometimes maybe those slight changes could be even a little bit of a benefit. Like, I'm gonna use the Tebesar example, like,
Sure.
just how much more aggressive the defense was after you moved off of Tim Tebesar to Trent Bray, right? Like, that little bit of a difference provided, a spark. And I won't say like this will do the same thing. We just don't know until we see, come game day, right? But like, maybe for execution and communication, on both sides of the ball, maybe that provides a little bit more consistency, because we've talked about that being an issue of just being a
Right.
consistent football team and being a complete football team through 4 quarters of play. So maybe those are the slight things that, kind of need to change, right? Like,
Right. I mean, I
yeah.
think you could also whittle it down, Ryan, to even just a few more, specific situations where it's like, I think it doesn't even take rocket science. It's like defense. Okay. Oregon State's defense has shown some good things in spurts, but as we know, Ryan, they're extremely susceptible to the deep shot play down the field. Right, like that's just you like one thing point blank. Like the pass rush has gotten a little bit better, the run defense has gotten a little bit better, but then it's like okay, then an opponent will just throw deep, and that's been an Achilles heel. Offensively, my goodness, like you know why this has been changed because I mean, I need to go and look, Ryan, but like Oregon State's got to be near the top of the country in 3-and-outs. Like they just have these, they'll have
17
moments.
points per game. Yeah.
Right. It's like you have these moments where I think it was against App State where they scored in like 3 plays and you're like, "Wow, okay, like where's that offense?" And but then they follow it up with, back-to-back, 3-and-outs where they just get off the field in 3 plays. And how many times, Ryan, against Wake Forest did the Beavers go out there, maybe they got one first down and then it was, three straight. It's just it did not look good, and I think more than anything the offense needed a reset. Now longtime Beaver fans are definitely familiar with Danny Langsdorf and what he did with, a lot of pro-style quarterbacks in Oregon State's past. Maybe he can get a little bit, better production from Malik Murphy. And, you never know. I mean, like we said, it's very unpredictable. And that's what, despite an FCS team that I think Oregon State's going to beat, Ryan, that's why this game has far more intrigue to me than it did at this point last week, where it's like, okay, well, Lafayette. But now, new play caller, new defensive play caller, like things are going to be different. We're probably going to see some different personnels. Like it's going to be different.
Yeah, and that's the thing that like I think maybe more intrigues me just kind of like from both sides of the ball, just
Sure.
especially for the offensive side, right? They're at the bottom in terms of points scored,
Yep.
and it's like with that amount of talent that you have on at least on that side of the ball, like yeah, things got to change. And even too, like in that Wake Forest game, you also saw that like that was the first time that Ryan Gunderson was down on the field calling
Right.
plays. Like that was
Interesting.
unique.
Yeah.
Like he's never done that before on the sideline. Like so clearly a change was coming one way or another. It
Right.
seemed like with how things were going with the play calling duties. So yeah, like I'm curious to see what Langs does. Like obviously, yeah, it's different from the last time he called plays in this situation.
Sure.
So there is a bit of that, but like
He,
if
he, he he might have been Ryan looking around being like, okay, well, Malik and Jabari can sling it, but he's like, I love you, Trent, but is there Brandon Cooks in this room? Like, 'cause
yeah,
that-
is there another option out there that we can comfortably rely upon? Like it's like we don't want to get you killed over the middle. Like that's
Right.
that's the thing. Like
Right.
so I think if Langs is able to get the most out of kind of everybody on that side of the ball, I would say that would be a significant kind of moral victory to take away from this weekend. So
Yeah.
but yeah, like legitimately, like 0-7 Oregon State versus a 5-2 FCS team in Lafayette. I have no idea what any of this means to you,
Right.
other than like the changes. That's it. That's legitimately it. I'm like we'll see what happens. I'm like
Yeah,
I've been
it's
asked
gonna
about
be
that. I'm
it-
like I don't know.
Right.
Couldn't tell you.
It's gonna be fascinating. Again, it's just one of those things. I don't mean to downplay Lafayette, but again, Ryan, when you play an FCS team and they are relatively top 30 in like FCS polls at 5-2, I compare it to a couple years ago when Oregon State played Montana State and they were one of the top teams in FCS. Excuse me, I want to say like top 5 or something like that, and they still rolled. And it's like if you game plan properly, you're just going to have better athletes simply at each position when you're talking FBS over FCS. So as long as you guard against, the real crazy upset, yeah, I think it will, make a significant difference. So that all being said, that's gonna pretty much wrap up our thoughts on Lafayette. We'll add maybe a few things here at the end, but I want to switch gears, Ryan, and talk the coaching search because that's what's going to be on the top of everybody's mind now. It's really at the end of the day, and I mean that to no disrespect to the players and the coaches that are going to see this thing through this year, it's more important than what happens over the final 5 weeks. Who you hire is far more important than what happens in the final 5 games of the season.
Especially with kind of the hot seat that, Oregon State finds itself in right now. So that it's even more of an onus to nail it down.
Oh yeah. And then you add in the fact, like, sure, you don't want to go 0-12. That doesn't make your job very attractive to other candidates. You'd like to pick up a couple, and I still think the Beavers can, if they handle this change correctly and be in the three maybe 4 win campaign. However, again, the coaching search is where it's all going to start. First off, just want to plug, we got a Beavers Edge coaching search special going right now. You can join Beavers Edge for $1 for $1 for 7 days for new members only. Check that out at BeaversEdge.com, where we've already got a couple versions of our hotboard. We debuted it on Monday. We updated it yesterday. We'll have one more update coming in this afternoon, dropping in 2 more names as well. So definitely keep eyes on that. If you want to know who could be in the mix, stay tuned to Beavers Edge. Me, Ryan, Dylan, Brogan will all be collaborating, keeping ears to the ground as far as names go. However, I want to start with the couple names that were public, announced by On3's Pete Nakos not too long ago, is Brett Vigen over at Montana State, Tim Plough down at UC Davis, and then Jason Eck down at New Mexico. Those were the 3 that were dropped. We've obviously got many, many more over at Beavers Edge on that hot board, including one big name. So, keep eyes. Maybe even a couple big names. We got a dream candidate section too that Ryan helped me come up with as well. So definitely, if you're curious on what names could be there, stay locked into us. But Ryan, early on, we're hearing a little bit of hubbub, and it's that at least at this early stage, there might be a closer look at FCS coaches first, or FCS coaches could be kind of calling, showing interest in the job, and it sounds like that's where it's starting. That does align with, obviously, Plough and Vigen. Jason Eck, as we kind of talked about and heard from Pete, it's very likely that Wisconsin's going to move on from Luke Fickell after, at some point this season. If they don't, this conversation's different, but in that case, it sounds like Jason Eck would be their top choice to take over Wisconsin. So for the sake of this, as far as the names Pete reported, Plough and Vigen are kind of the 2 names. Vigen, very intriguing to me with what he's been able to accomplish at Montana State. Plough, a little less experience, but with how quickly he was able to turn them into a contender at the FCS level in just first season, shows me he's got the coaching chops. So I mean, it's almost in the path, Ryan, a little bit of Washington State, where they kind of looked and identified Jimmy Rogers last year and kind of leaned into the FCS way to kind of develop talent and kind of, go that route. I think Oregon State could still go the coordinator route. I still think there are some sitting head coaches out there at the FBS level who they could pry from current situations. Again, more hot board at Beaver's Edge. But just of those couple names, Plough and Vigen, Ryan, what kind of intrigues you about either one of those guys, and would you have one as kind of your top as opposed to the other right now?
I'd say more of just I would need to look more into Tim Plough and myself, but like the fact that he has been able to turn around UC Davis pretty quickly, it's impressive. It's impressive. You got to give credit where credit's due on that. But Brent Vigen is mine. And I have the most familiarity with Vigen, obviously, because I have family that are Montana State alums, so I pay attention to some FCS ball here and there.
Yeah, we got some insider info here from Ryan Harlan.
But like, what Vigen's been able to do up there, especially kind of given the history of what Montana State has been as a football program, is thoroughly impressive. And like, he would be, in a perfect world, if I were making the call, he would be my first, kind of call I'd reach out to for this job. Just because, like, you've seen it work with, Matt Entz at Fresno State going from North Dakota, Jimmy Rogers going to Wazoo. Like, I had my reservations to start out, but I am more kind of in that boat now of like, okay, I wouldn't mind taking a flyer. Now, I know the situation that Oregon State finds itself in, you can't necessarily take a flyer, but like, you get kind of where I'm kind of coming from on that. On like,
totally.
I wouldn't say no. I wouldn't be like, that's, a non-starter for me, right? Like, that's kind of where I'm, at in terms of getting a guy a chance from the FCS ranks. But yeah, Vigen and just like been able to build that up. Montana State has been a contender in the FCS for since he's gotten there. So
Because
you
historically,
know,
they haven't been nearly as good as Montana, right? Like they've
no,
kind
yeah,
of risen up and kind of become the,
yeah,
the dude there in town. And I think it's kind of had always been Montana for the longest time.
yeah. So that's something there where I'm like, I would be okay with that. Like if somehow it were to be Vegan's the guy. But that's
Right. So
just
that,
kind of like my initial impressions on everything, in a perfect world if I were making the call, but I'm
yeah, I
not.
mean, I
So
think Vegan is a bit more of an attractive candidate considering his track record. It's a longer sample size, but at the same token, I think what Plough's been able to do at UC Davis, as you mentioned, intriguing. There's a couple more names in the Beaver's Edge hot board that I think are intriguing. I'll drop a couple like. Brennan Marion down at Sacramento State. I know he's
yeah.
early on in his career and first year head coach, and it would be a calculated risk. But you're talking about a guy who created his own offense. I remember a year ago, Ryan, when we were on this podcast, and our good buddy TJ Mathewson, shout out the Mariners, man. Got to take a moment and say, our old comrade, absolutely killing it up there with the Marine Layer podcast on the doorstep of the World Series. But Ryan, I remember TJ on this podcast talking to us about how Brennan Marion developed the go-go offense and was pretty much like Oregon State's not going to have a good chance of slowing this down. Oregon State did lose to UNLV, and I think of note it's a risk, but Brennan Marion has that personality. He is a presence. He's one heck of a recruiter, and he's one of those guys that you give him a couple years, he's gonna turn Sac State into a good program, and someone else will hire him for sure. Like that's how that'll go. So he's one. I think you could also shoot big, as we talked about. There's some dream candidates. I still think that there's somebody who spent a lot of time here in the Pacific Northwest, who maybe was recently in the NFL and then back now to college, who I think would be a very interesting call. And Ryan knows who I'm talking about, but I don't want to spoil it here. Again, check out Beaver's Edge, the hot board. But overall, yeah, I think there will be more names that continue to arise, Ryan. I think we'll continue to hear more as far as names that come up, maybe names that cool down a little bit, and for all intents and purposes, as I mentioned earlier, this is going to be a multi-pronged attack with the athletic department, external, internal players, maybe some former on-field players, and as we talked about, the onus is on them to get it right. It's going to be huge. Like the future of Oregon State football, like this hire is cataclysmic. I truly believe that, Ryan.
Oh yeah, like that's what it is. It's the scrutiny's there. A lot of eyes are on you. Fans are talking not only with their wallet but with their attendance at
Right.
football games. Like the
Says a
situation
lot.
is what it is. Like, and there's no other way to beat around the bush about it. Like you have to nail this hire, or otherwise, like I wouldn't know what to say other than it wouldn't be good. I think going forward for the program, because it's like you're in a real tough spot with kind of how this season's gone, and then now you're going into a newly rebuilt Pac-12 where if you're truly the top of the top in this new Pac-12, you got to show it year
Right.
one right away.
Yeah, I mean it's not going to be easy. Boise State's in there. San Diego State looks good. There are some coaches in the league now that are Matt Entz, right, at Fresno State. Like the new Pac-12 suddenly has some established coaches, right? I'm forgetting his name, but the guy down at Texas State has been doing some good things with them as well. So lots of factors, lots of angles to consider, and obviously, I think it's key, Ryan, that Scott Barnes has talked about having this be a process that will include a committee, a search firm. It won't just be Barnes making this decision. He might be the final decision maker, so to speak, as that's kind of his job. But it sounds like it'll be a bit more collaborative than even my experience when Jonathan Smith was hired more than a few years ago now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
That's good,
like
right? Yeah,
it's at least good, but I think there is some healthy skepticism, making the right decision. You know what I mean? Like, and
totally.
rightfully so. So it's one of those where if you're Barnes, like this is the biggest hire that you got to make of your entire career.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about where it's at a precipice. I think the Beavers are in a better position to hire a coach now than they were necessarily 2 years ago when there was no future of the conference and Trent Bray was there. So I do think they will be positioned better futurely. But yeah, the onus will be on there to get it high or to get the hire right and make sure that this person is somebody who has a clear vision for how to build and rebuild, retool, whatever it is, this program. So the other thing I want to make note mention of too, just keep an eye on Oregon State's recruiting class. Obviously, with Trent Bray now gone, there's a good chance that the class, could dissipate a little bit. I'm not, Dylan Callahan Crowley is getting in touch with the class, seeing which guys, are firm, which are going to maybe start looking at options. The big headline here, though, Ryan, is regardless of what happens, the class is pretty small right now anyway. I think you're sitting at around 7 or 8 athletes. Don't have it exactly in front of me at the moment. But the good news is when you hire a new coach, you're probably going to be able to bring a good bit of his recruiting class at what his school is right now with him, in addition to the transfer portal like we saw with Jimmy Rogers at Washington State, where he brought over a ton of guys from South Dakota State, excuse me, and was able to, kind of retool the roster quickly. And we've seen Ryan, the Cougs nearly went into the Grove and beat Ole Miss in year one of the Jimmy Rogers era. So,
yeah, and that's why, like, seeing that, like, I'm a little more open to grabbing a guy from the FCS ranks. I'm like, okay, maybe I have my reservations.
A winner is a winner.
Yep, I had my reservations early on, but I'm like, okay, I can be convinced. I can be convinced.
Right. I think it comes down to a winner's a winner, and it makes you wonder how Kalen DeBoer was able to hide at Sioux Falls for so long before someone's like, all right, maybe this guy who's like won everywhere he's went should get a chance to be a head coach. And then, at the FBS level, and we've seen it work out, most notably, I'd say Kirk Cignetti is probably the poster child of that right now, Ryan, where it's like the dude just flat won everywhere he's went. And Vigen, same question. It's early, only at Montana State, but he's won and won very successfully there. So again, stay tuned to Ryan Harlan, Brenden Slaughter, myself, as we will be getting you guys ready for Lafayette on Saturday. It's a night game at Reser Stadium. We'll see what the attendance looks like this week. Could also be a bit of a wet game, but I'm curious to see if some Beaver fans come out to see the changes with this squad. And as always, make sure to stay locked in to Ryan Harlan, Brenden Slaughter, Dylan Callahan Crowley, and myself for all the latest on Oregon State, everything working behind the scenes, the coaching search, the blueprint story, much, much more. Again, we have it all locked in at BeaversEdge.com, and stay locked in to the damn board as well, talking with all your Beaver fans. Join Beavers Edge for just $1 for 7 days right now at BeaversEdge.com. Thanks for watching.